Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 29th of April, 2026. Welcome to those online and joining us in person today. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website and YouTube. Committee members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in their deliberations. I'd like to acknowledge that today we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. I'd like to thank everyone for your patience with our slightly later start time today while the members received a briefing. Thank you very much for putting up with our delayed start today. We do appreciate it. So today we have all members attending in person with Commissioner Lakey attending online, but no apologies. Members, are there any requests for leave of absence? No, thank you very much. We'll move to disclosure of interests. In relation to item 3.1, the Part 7B application to amend approved service commercial development in Bovell. We have Member Harmon declaring a proximity interest in that he is employed by Statutory Property Group, which is recently working on a project in proximate to this site. And on that basis, I understand you'll step out on this. Thank you. On the same item, Commissioner Heron declared an actual impartiality interest in that his former employer Urbis acted for the applicant and he was still employed by Urbis when the DA was lodged. Commissioner Heron, I understand you're stepping out on this item. Thank you. In relation to item 3.2, the development application of the social and affordable housing at the Parkway in Ellenbrook, Member Harmon has declared a perceived impartiality interest in that Satterley Group owns a commercial development at 125 The Promenade, but that is at least 50 metres away and unaffected, and no submission was made on this item. So I'm happy to accept that as impartiality if all members are. Yes. Thank you. And in relation to item 3.4, the section 31 reconsideration of subdivision conditions in Yanchep, Commissioner Adair has declared an actual impartiality interest. She has a family relationship with a lawyer in the planning environment area of Lavin, and Lavin is representing the applicant on this matter and so therefore will not participate in the item. Thank you very much, Commissioner Adair. The West Australian Planning Commission also is both a landowner and decision maker in relation to the development application at the Parkway in Ellenbrook. This is an interest in common shared by members and is not considered to prejudice our ability to determine the matter. Are there any other disclosures of interest? Thank you very much. Disclosures of representation. I do have one in relation to item 3.5, the subdivision of lot 110 Hampton Road in Sarah. I did meet with the Shire of Murray last week on another matter. This matter was raised. We had a very brief discussion and no information was not provided to members today. Members, are there any other disclosures of representation? Thank you very much. And all members, please indicate that they've received and considered the agenda ahead of today's meeting. Thank you all. And just noting that additional information has been provided for members following the Monday briefing. Now move to confirmation of minutes for Wednesday, the 1st of April, 2026. Members, are there any matters arising from the minutes? Thank you very much. Could I then have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Moved by Member Franklin, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Any dissent? Thank you. That carried. So we will now deal with deputations and Jonathan Mesnard will take us from here. Thank you, Jonathan.
Chair, I welcome everyone who is present in order to make a deputation today, either in person or via Zoom. You will be invited to join the table or promoted to a panelist for your deputation. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a timer that will appear on the screen. You do have a PowerPoint presentation. This will be displayed on the screen throughout your deputation, and you are requested to advise when it's time to advance the slides. Regarding item 3.1, part 11B2, application to amend approved service commercial development at lot 805 Chapman Hill Road, have Emma Dunning and Alex Drake Brockman, who will be joining us online. You're about to receive an invitation to rejoin as a panelist. Please accept if it comes through. Thanks, Emma and Alex. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Alex and I are representing Arise Development, obviously the developer on this project. We are here in support of the application. We'd like to thank the SDAU for their assistance in progressing this through the system. We're seeking to have approval for the additional use of trade supplies allocated to a single tenancy in addition to the existing approved uses for the site. We obviously are here for any questions that arise through the deliberation. Alex, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add other than thanks to the city for supporting the application. It's been great to work with them on this one.
Emma and Alex, thank you for your deputation today. I will now see if members have any questions for you. Any questions, members? No questions for you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Regarding item 3.2, our next deputation, development application, social and affordable housing, lot 29, the Parkway, Ellenbrook. We have Cade Taylor, who will be joining via Zoom. Cade, you'll also receive an invitation to rejoin as a panelist. Please accept. Thank you, Cade.
You're on mute, Kate.
Okay, just need to unmute. Oh, yep, great. Thank you.
We got there in the end. I tested it all before we got on, and now I had to read it.
Not always the way.
Sorry, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. Due to limited time, I won't go over all the slides word for word, but I'm happy to accept questions at the end for anything I skip over that may require additional information. I'm here in support of Lot 29, the Parkway, Ellenbrook. Development WA are the developer and the proponent of this particular project. You've already done a welcome to country, so I won't, on the next slide, sorry, I won't redo that, but I would like to extend my acknowledgement and respect, extend that to all of the Indigenous communities we work with throughout our vast state. That program background, so DevWA HAF program is a combined state and federal government initiative to improve housing outcomes for low to middle income earners. The state funds the capital expenditure shortfall, which is the shortfall between the costs of the build and sale price to the community housing providers. And the feds are funding the ongoing operational costs for a 25-year duration to assist in maintaining them as build to rent. There's 1,100, DevWA is undertaking 14 projects consisting of 1,145 apartments. Our Ellenbrook project is a significant and important part of that program, and it makes up 17% of that overall number of 1,145. All of the apartments are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. They have a tenancy mix of 20% social and 80% affordable. The idea is to sell these projects as a single line to community housing providers at the back end, and that will to manage as build to rent apartments for a minimum of 25 years. If you could go on to the next slide, please. There's some information there about the eligibility for these rentals. They're based on the federal income limits, which is a little bit more generous than the state ones. But again, I won't go into a lot of detail on that particular one. On the next slide, a pretty picture. So it's just one of the internal views of the project. It's location of this, and onto the next one is the overall location of the site in very close proximity, obviously, to the Ellenbrook train station on the opposite corner and across the road from the Swan Active Recreational Centre, which is under construction. On the next slide, please. That's our ground floor as it currently stands. North and south entries to internalised parking, all of these services, resident amenity is all internal to the site, with 4 main buildings addressing adjacent streets. On the next slide, and the next few slides actually relate mostly to addressing some of the commentary we received back from GAWA, DPLH and the community. So again, I won't spend too much time on these, but happy to answer questions. One of the questions we had related to the location of the commercial retail tenancy, and there were some queries as to why it wasn't on the corner facing the train station. We did have a concept that did reflect that design, and ended up choosing this location here for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because access to parking in that exact or adjacent location where people could stop in, grab a coffee and move on. Also, CHP has requested that the commercial space is adjacent to or close to their office, and the office is on the opposite side of the driveway there. And it also helps to activate and help with security, the entry, that southern entry to the car park next to the CHP office.
Thank you, Cade. You are now over a minute over your allocated time, so we might just have to pause there and go to questions. I think we would have had a question on the location that you've just been outlining, so happy to let that one run, but I might now just ask you to pause so we can go to questions. Members, are there any questions of Cade? Go ahead, Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. Cade, I just wanted to ask you, this is a prime location in Ellenbrook, so it's given its proximity to the train station, it's one of, I think, 2 sites that's meant to be really strongly mixed use. I'm a bit curious that you've got less than 50 square metres for a small low intensity operation, and that's your only contribution to mixed use in such a prime location. Can you explain why you feel that that's an appropriate mix? Why you've gone this way?
Well, partly. I think the biggest driver here for us is the provision and delivery of housing, and provision and delivery of much needed housing in proximity to a train station. So that's been the largest driver of the mix that's been provided on this site. And also the way that these will be managed and owned into the future is by community housing providers, and community housing providers by nature are not managers and owners typically of commercial spaces or retail spaces. They specialise in the management and ownership of community and social housing. So it also suits their needs going forward for the next 25 years.
Is there anything further?
No, I will leave it to debate.
Okay, thank you. Members? Thank you, Commissioner Herron.
Yeah, thank you for your deputation, and particularly the explanation about the location of the retail component. Can I clarify? I'm assuming, obviously, that the rent generated from that is then provided, basically to offset, subsidise the overall cost of the operation of the operation overall. Is that a fair assumption?
Look, there's no exact science to how this commercial or retail tenancy will operate. It will be up to the owner, the community housing provider, to operate it as they see fit, and that may be to sublease it out to someone who may be experienced at running that style of operation, or they may use it as an opportunity to engage some of the residents in employment and run it themselves. Or anything in between. So there's no set formula for how that space will run.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may just follow up on that, because again, there is the issue about quantum, and we can leave that for the discussion. But in terms of it basically being used as a, an extension of the office space or a non-active use, is there any way in which that would be controlled or managed, or is that purely at the discretion of the operator?
Yeah, I think largely at the discretion of the operator, but I think that the office space that they have is sufficient on the opposite side of the driveway for their purposes. So I wouldn't expect that they'd need additional office space for that size of development. And it is intended as a low intensity cafe style offer. So it's not deep fryers and large scale extraction. It'd be sandwiches and muffins and coffees is pretty much the extent of the offer.
Thank you. Through the chair, finally, just in relation, obviously the design review process has been a number of modifications made in relation to that. I'm assuming that there's nothing to distinguish between the social housing units versus the affordable units, that they are basically interblended, intermixed and indistinguishable. Is that also a fair assumption?
That is, yeah. We call it tenure blind. So any apartment could be for any or all uses.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other questions? There are no other questions. Thank you very much for your deputation today.
Thank you.
Good. For our next deputation regarding item 3.3, City of Subiaco Local Plan Policy 1.1, Amendments to Residential Design Planning Code Volume 1, we have Anthony Denham and Emily Robertson. Anthony, I can see that you're online. I'll promote you to a panelist now. Anthony, you've shown up in the panelist list. You just need to unmute and on the camera.
Here he comes.
On mute.
Sorry, still on mute for the moment.
Technology.
Anthony, are you having trouble unmuting? No. Can you hear us? Hello? We cannot hear you. I'm not sure if you can hear us. Can you please indicate if you can hear us? Yes, but we cannot hear you. The other thing we could do is ring them. Phone number? Yes. Anthony, we might have to give you a call on the phone. If you could just have your phone ready, we will call you and we're going to have to do this over the telephone. Anthony, we're calling your phone at the moment. Do you have your phone handy? You think we could maybe go to the next deputation and come back to see?
Meeting room.
Just give
Need to be the meeting room phone number.
Oh, there's the phone number.
That's the meeting room for that one.
Oh,
It's in the chat.
Yeah, got it. Calling now. that works. I'm just going to put you on speakerphone for everyone.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners and staff. I'm speaking on behalf of the City in support of retaining the lot boundary setback provisions within Local Planning Policy 1.1.
Anthony, can you maybe mute your feed, because we can't, we're getting both the feed and your voice.
Yeah. These
Thank
provisions are not new. They were in another of our residential streetscape policies, Local Planning Policy 1.2 apartments, which augmented volume 2 of the R code. And with the R code's reform, we have just transferred them into Local Planning Policy 1.1 to address Part C requirements. They were developed through extensive community consultation during the preparation of our Local Planning Scheme number 5 in 2020 and in 2021. The City had originally proposed building height controls at density interfaces, but removed them following department advice, adopting this setback-based approach instead. The purpose of these provisions is simple: to manage the transition between higher and lower density residential areas, and to protect the setting of heritage places, reduce visual bulk, limit overlooking, and help preserve the amenity and character that defines Subiaco. Importantly, these controls only apply to around 90 properties across the city. Most of these 90 properties are already developed or can accommodate the setbacks without meaningful impact on yield. Where site constraints arise, the policy allows the flexibility through the design principle assessment. Multiple dwellings require development approval in any event. In my experience, all multiple dwellings proposals in Subiaco require design principle assessment due to the unique nature of their lots and their streets. That is, the City's proposal will not make it harder to receive development approval. The proposed EPLH modifications changes will not alter that either, to the point of meaningful processing efficiency. The City's recent report of review approved by the Commission in December 2025 confirms that Subiaco is already on track to meet and exceed its dwelling targets. Removing these provisions would deliver little housing benefit while creating real impacts on the amenity, heritage and neighbourhood character. There is also a process concern. We submitted this policy to the Commission in September last year with an expected time frame of 60 days to determine. It's now been over 7 months and there's been substantive changes proposed that have already been raised recently, well after consultation. This will require further council consideration, further delaying the effective operation of Local Planning Policy 1.1. This compromises the City's broader planning framework, given the 10th of April deadline has already passed, making it difficult for the City to ensure orderly and proper planning can occur whilst creating confusion and uncertainty for developers, the community and officers. In summary, the City strongly urges the Commission to retain these provisions as proposed by the City. The provisions were developed through extensive consultation with the community, and their retention is critical to maintaining appropriately informed transitions and community confidence in the planning framework. They are targeted, balanced and essential to protecting Subiaco's character while supporting appropriate growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony and Emily. It's Emma Cole speaking to you now. I'll see whether members have any questions for you. Members, thank you, Commissioner Heron.
Yeah, thank you for your deputation. If I can ask, and again, taking on board the points you've raised, and particularly in relation to the proposed schedule of modifications, have you done any modelling into when you say that there is no change in terms of yield or the like, or no substantive change? Have you done any modelling in terms of what it would be with or without the modifications as proposed?
Through the chair, this is Emily speaking. We did some design testing about a year ago now, and that was when we were proposing to amend building height and lot boundary setbacks. That design testing found that there was only a minor effect on development yield, and the same dwellings could be delivered, although smaller dwellings, so maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms rather than 2 or 3 bedrooms.
Thank you.
Members, are there any other questions? Anthony and Emily, I did raise with the officers whether there was a need for transition between R20 and R50 lots, and they have provided the committee with additional information that demonstrates that that actually affects a very low number of lots. But I just wondered if you had considered transition at that sort of, whether transition is between R20 and R50 and if there was a need for any local planning provisions in that regard.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think we would consider a range of things as part of the development of this policy. Obviously, the transition between R20 and R50 it can be harsh at times, so the policy does seek to address that. I'm not sure what was discussed with the department officers and the SPC before, but yeah, if there's anything else we can add to that, Emily, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. It was just a question when we have our briefing that I put to the officers, and they were able to demonstrate that there's very few lots affected that have that R20, R50 interface in terms of the lots that would be subject to this policy. Yeah, so that was just for your information, not a question for you. Yeah. All right. Members, are there any other questions? There are no other questions. Oh no, sorry, there is a question from Commissioner Heron.
Sorry, thank you. Just, and again, on the issue around the proposed variations, could you just explain the rationale that you saw between the setback requirements for the multiple dwelling versus the single house? I mean, obviously bulk and scale interface overlooking, I get, but in terms of whether it's a single house, group dwelling or multiple dwelling, can you just explain the rationale behind the additional setback requirements anticipated?
Thank you, and through the Chair. The setbacks required for multiple dwellings, and that being split by under 1,000 metres squared and over 1,000, that actually was transferred from our local planning 1.2, which directly related to volume 2 of the R codes. So when we amended these two policies, we were just looking at those across for those medium density multiple dwellings, rather than a restructure of the way that we dealt with these different dwelling types. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Anything further, members? Thank you very much for joining us today, Anthony and Emily.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next deputation regarding item 3.4, section 31, reconsideration of subdivision conditions, lot 9501 and 900. Riapanga Avenue, Yanchep. We have Alex Watson, Ryan Hunter and Matthew Johns joining us in person. Please come forward.
Morning.
Okay, good morning. Members, thanks for the opportunity to speak. We're speaking in favour of the officer's recommendation that the Commission vary the decision on the subdivision application in question. Next slide, please, Jonathan. The new conditions recommended by the department reflect the agreed outcomes of the recent SAT review process, which examined the nexus relationship between the application and the Marmion Avenue extension north road. The application covers 229 lots of 577 planned for Indy. The Northwest Sub-Regional Planning Framework of 2018 does not show an extension of Marmion north of Torrey Pango, and the first structure plan amendment mentioned under approval history in the officer's report proposed what we thought was a consequential downgrade of that section of road from district distributor to neighbourhood connector. Through the processes that followed, it emerged that Main Roads and DPLH are planning for Marmion north of Torrey Pango to carry more than 50,000 vehicles per day by 2050, which means that a primary distributor road is now being planned. This brings different funding arrangements that will not rely on the city or any one developer. Separately, it is evident that the traffic demand generated by Indy is minimal relative to either a district distributor or a primary distributor. So the original conditions over apportion costs to parcel and the housing authority. The proposed conditions rectify this in accordance with the agreement made SAT. Next slide, please, and I'll hand it up.
Thanks, Alex. I wanted to spend just a minute talking through and I guess emphasising some of the context about the issue that we've dealt with for what has been nearly 6 years now. When we talk about the traffic volumes, the latest main roads data has 51,000, nearly 52,000 vehicles per day going on Marmion Avenue, which based on recent traffic counts on Marmion Avenue would have more vehicles using this section than any current made section of Marmion Avenue in its entirety. So that really sort of references the regional context of what was proposed. When we look at the plan, there is no structure plan to the north of the property. And the nearest road connection that either Marmion Avenue or Torria Pango would be connecting to is over 3 kilometres away. So 3 kilometres away with no approved structure plan or development intention in place. And through that journey, there's been quite a change in, I guess, the alignments and everything else of the regional road network that has been planned there. So what we've been working with is trying to continue land supply whilst dealing with this, I guess, change of hierarchy of roads in the corridor. Next slide, please. So what we're really happy with, whilst there's been a long history, we're pleased to say we're in a position today to request support of the officer's recommendation as it's written. The outcome reflects a contribution from the project that's well beyond what Needham Nexus would typically provide. We'll be providing the road land area free of cost. We will be bulk earthworking the entire corridor and building a significant portion of that road. What we won't be doing at this time is building traffic lights that are based on a couple of thousand vehicles a day, or providing a connection which doesn't have any lot connections to it, which could effectively be a drag strip in this type of location for quite a considerable time. So we think it's a very appropriate outcome for what is quite a challenging situation. We appreciate the opportunity, and approval today will enable the remaining 190 lots of that project to be delivered in 2027. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, Ryan and Matthew, for joining us today. Members, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. Through the chair, again, I understand the proposition being put forward and the issue around traffic lights, etc. Is there any cost sharing arrangements currently in place within this broader district, given that there is not a structure plan to the north?
So there's no traditional DCP related to it. There was a infrastructure deed that was set up in relation to creation of the super lots. That infrastructure deed relates to the old road network and wasn't, I guess, kept up when the road networks changed, and that's what's created the circumstance today. So the roads that were funded and delivered now don't carry as much traffic as what they were intending to.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I can then, well, again, an issue perhaps for the City of Wanneroo in terms of how that is revised. I mean, my understanding is the standard would be that earthworks plus one carriageway. So that's in terms of comparative analysis, I'm assuming that what you're proposing in terms of all earthworks and that partial construction would be basically equivalent. Is that the option?
So what we do, because we're providing the full road width without compensation, which the current conditions do provide, we're providing, it works out to something like 50 or 60% of the total cost in that area based on that.
Thank you very much.
Members, anything further? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you. For our next deputation regarding item 3.5, subdivision of 47 lots, lot 110 Hampton Road, Pinjarra, determination. We have Rod Peake, who is joining us online. Rod, you're about to receive an invitation to rejoin as a panelist. Please, it comes through. Rod, and it's just a case of unmuting and turning on the camera. Rod, you're unmuted. We should be able to hear you. Just, are you able to turn on the camera, please?
Rod, can you hear us? Hi, Rod.
Grandma's right in force today.
Rod, we might have to give you a call. We can't hear or see you.
Mute and unmute.
Rod, I'm just calling the number that you provided as part of your deputation application. Rod, again, just going to put you on loudspeaker. The connection's not great. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm just going to put you on loudspeaker for the committee.
Hi, Rod. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yep, sorry, we haven't been able to get the technology to work, so we're reverting to the telephone, but you're free to go. Please go ahead.
Okay. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to present with you today. The Shire of Murray supports the recommendation to approve the subdivision application. However, we request a modification to condition 14 to broaden its scope, and that's particularly in regard to the local development plan. Our suggested wording, as was outlined in our deputation, to extend the local development plan across the entire subdivision and ensure that it addresses the key build form elements, particularly relating to setbacks and open space requirements. The basis for this request is that there's no structure plan in place for this site, which would ordinarily establish the applicable residential density coding. As a result, the Shire's local planning scheme applies a default R10 density code, which we consider inappropriate given the size of the proposed lots. We support the approval of the subdivision without a structure plan in this instance for the reasons clearly set out in the agenda report. This does create a consequential issue for the future development of the lots. These lots will not be able to be reasonably developed with the or in accordance with the R10 deemed to comply provisions, particularly in relation to setbacks and open space. And without an alternative framework, each of the future dwellings would likely require a development application and the exercise of discretion. This would create uncertainty for the landowners. It would lead to inconsistency and uncoordinated build form outcomes and introduce unnecessary cost, delay and administrative burden for both the applicants and for the Shire. The issue is acknowledged in the agenda report, but in our view is not fully resolved through the recommended conditions. And the Shire considers that this can be effectively addressed through a broad local development plan requirement, expanding condition 14 to apply across all of the lots and to guide setback and open space requirements in a manner aligned with the intended lot sizes. That will provide a clear and practical pathway for development. Importantly, this approach will establish certainty upfront and reduce reliance on repeated discretionary assessments at the development stage. Of course, we acknowledge that there are alternative pathways, including the preparation of a structure plan or an amendment to the local planning scheme. In this case, those approaches are not considered proportionate to the scale and nature of the development. So we respectfully request that the committee approve the subdivision today with the amended condition 14 as proposed by the Shire. Thank you.
Rod, thank you very much. It's Emma Cole, Chair, speaking to you now. I might just ask the first question in relation to the utility of the LDP. I just wanted to flesh that out a little bit more, do you believe that that will fully address the development of the lots in the future? I think when we look at your scheme, the single house being an AA use, which would ordinarily be a 90-day advertising period, just wondering how, in effect, you will work around some of the matters in the scheme and what your view is on whether you can deal with any exempt development if we proceed on the basis as recommended.
Yeah, look, the deemed provision exemptions for single houses are not compliant on permissibility. But even if they were, and we did need to require development applications for each lot, including the LDP and the replacement deemed to comply provisions in the LDP, would certainly increase the certainty of developers to receive an approval on those applications. But we don't believe development applications will be necessary given the exemption in the deemed provisions.
Thank you, Rod. I'll go to members for questions. Commissioner Herron, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rod. Can you clarify whether the Shire sees this as a interim or a longer term solution?
Normally, the current zoning of residential development requires that a structure plan be prepared, and that structure plan would put in place a density code. That hasn't happened in this case, and we don't believe it's necessary given the context of this site. But but we would see it as a short-term thing, and we would move to amend the scheme upon development of the site where there's some certainty, and we can place the actual residential density codes.
Thank you. Through the chair, further to that, can you provide advice in terms of where the Shire is at in terms of its scheme review? I was thinking maybe that might correlate with something associated with this being an interim solution.
Sure. We have a local planning strategy in with the department at the moment. We're hoping for that to be presented to the committee in the next couple of months. We have a draft local planning scheme that, subject to any changes arising from the commission's feedback at the advertising stage, we intend to present that to the department for consideration. So that would come in to the commission or to the department later this year.
Thank you. And finally, through the chair, in terms of the mechanism, I'm assuming the primary driver here in terms of seeking this solution versus a structure plan is one of timing. And I understand in terms of urban structure, but if there are changes made to the subdivision plan it's difficult without seeing a copy of what this LDP would look like. I'm just trying to figure out, would there need to be any changes to the subdivision plan would then subsequently also require changes to the LDP as well? I'm just mindful in terms of the implementation side.
I don't believe so. The LDP would deal with development requirements primarily, and those development requirements are set out in the Shire's suggested alternative wording for Condition 14. We say that should apply across all of the lots for this particular subdivision, and that would effectively introduce alternative deemed to comply provisions that suit the amended lot size, and also address the laneway lots and the orientation of development towards Hampton Road.
Thank you. Sorry, just one further one. Is the Shire status, because I know that the notion of the cottage lots was a primary driver for the Shire as well in terms of seeking to get some density. Is the Shire satisfied with the extent of density that's currently being proposed?
We would have preferred a little higher density. However, the lot sizes proposed are relatively consistent with the land immediately to the north. There's a retirement village there, and that will produce a consistent lot product to that. And it does provide for some smaller lot product in Shire. So whilst we would have preferred some higher density on this site, we're satisfied that it's acceptable given its location within the town site.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brooks, go ahead.
Hi, Rod. I have a couple more, I guess, technical questions. In the district structure plan documentation at the moment for this site, it refers to retention of mature trees wherever possible. Are you satisfied that, obviously with this current subdivision, it's unlikely that any trees within the site would be retained because of fill requirements, and there's no open space, and the roads are likely to require filling as well. Is the Shire comfortable with that approach?
Yes, the site doesn't contain, or the site's largely been cleared in the past. There is some vegetation on the site. Perhaps the best trees for retention are up either within the road reserve or immediately adjacent to the road reserve. But as you point out, given the lot sizes and importantly the need of filling the site in this case, other than the treed birch, there's no practical way that we can retain the current vegetation. There is, I note, a condition that requires the provision for street trees, and we would seek those to be applied both to the lots within the site and also within the Hampton Road reserve.
And in relation to water management, the current draft water management report, has that been reviewed by the Department of Water and Environment Regulation as well, or just yourselves? And have you had some feedback from them?
I believe it may have been referred to to DWER as part of the department's referral process. We haven't received the latest feedback. Well, I haven't received the feedback from that personally. Speaking to our engineers and environmental teams, we're confident that the recommended conditions can adequately address the need for water management on the site there.
So the current strategy that's outlined is for a temporary basin over 2 lots, and then the longer term implementation of underground detention and infiltration storage. There's nowhere else within the site where it could go, so that would have to be within road reserves. Is the Shire comfortable with the long-term management of underground storage within road reserves?
That will need to be demonstrated through more detailed planning, and I think the Shire did raise some concerns with that within the road reserves, particularly because of the narrow width of those road reserves. There is the condition for the quarantining of 2 lots in this case, and we're comfortable that would be a fallback position for on-site detention, and the detail of that can be worked out through the further detail relating to in addressing the conditions of approval.
Thanks, Rod. Just one more thing. The current application shows a couple of options for the boundary road cross section, one of which shows battering outside of the subdivision area, which isn't included in the current subdivision under the current approval process. The other alternative is a fairly substantial retaining wall along the boundary. Is the Shire comfortable with that extent of retaining wall along that boundary to the existing drainage asset that lies on that boundary on the other side? And if and in that circumstance, I'm assuming that there would need to be a fence along that boundary to provide for safety associated with the drain. Is that?
Yes, we think that there are two options available. I understand that there has been some dialogue between the two landowners, and we'll participate in those discussions to satisfy the conditions of approval. But there is a fallback position in terms of establishing the retaining wall and the adequate fencing on top of that retaining wall as a fallback position. It's not ideal to have such a level difference between the two lots, particularly since part of that land is zone rural and has environmental constraints, so it probably won't change much in the future. But we think that there is enough flexibility in the conditions of approval to work through a practical resolution for that, given the constraints.
And in the event that would be battered down, it's shown as a 1 in 2 slope, which I'm assuming the Shire would still require a fence atop that extent of slope.
Yeah, 1 in 2 slope is probably a little steep, and so we would work the detail of that out in collaboration with the proponent. And that's really a detail I think that we would need to look at, and would necessitate the relocation of the drainage channel on the adjacent to that side boundary as well. So that may in fact provide some opportunities for the broader drainage for the town site as well, as part of those works and negotiations between the parties.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you. Go ahead, Member Harmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on one of the comments made by Commissioner Heron earlier in terms of timing between the difference. Sorry, Rod, I'm keen to get your view. What do you think the timing difference is between an LDP as proposed by the Shire versus a structure plan to get to the other end?
I think an LDP would be a much shorter process. We would largely the parameters could be dealt with internally under delegated authority at the Shire. There would be a need, I would think, for that LDP to be approved by the Commission as well, because it would necessarily need to deal with non-setback or non-street setback conditions, and also open space requirements. But I think that could be dealt with well within the time period of the construction phase. In terms of a structure plan, I think that would probably need to be prepared, and there's a lot more work that would need to go into the preparation of the structure plan, and then it would need to go through a fairly defined process, which would include council reporting, timeframes, etc., as well. And so that would probably be for the preparation and approval would probably be up to 12 months or thereabouts, which would be much longer than the LDP, I would imagine.
Sorry, so what do you reckon the LDP would be from a time, just ballpark timing? For
the preparation and adoption of it, depending on how long it takes in at the department, I would think that that could be within within 6 months.
Can I just ask a follow-on to that? Just the other factor there, Rod, is a scheme amendment. I know that that's mentioned in the report and was something that I think the Shire was willing to contemplate. Do you see that as a further option?
It can resolve the matter. We would still need an LDP to deal with the design outcomes for the laneway lots and the orientation of those lots towards Hampton Road. However, we're a little concerned about the timing of that. That would, for the preparation right through to the Gazette, or would be more like 18 months, I would imagine. And I think it's probably a matter of is it proportionate to the subdivision and necessary, or is it something that we can amend by way of an omnibus amendment through our scheme review, or otherwise pick that up at a time that it's efficient to deal with it with some other proposals.
Okay, thank you. Member Moore?
Oh, it was more about the LDP and the notion of it coming back to the Commission. Would that be a normal procedure? Normally the way it would work? I thought the LDP would have been dealt with by the Shire.
Sorry, the question. Yeah, the phone was breaking up. Could you repeat that question?
So I'm at a distance from the phone. I'll just repeat it. My question was in relation to the LDP potentially coming back for approval by the Commission. Is that the normal process? Because my thoughts were that the LDP would have been entirely by the Shire.
Yes, I think there's probably a couple of areas where the Commission's approval will likely be required. That will trigger the need for a Commission approval, and that's in relation to mainly in relation to the rear setbacks and the open space requirements.
Okay, thank you very much.
Members, further questions? Member Franklin?
Yes, through the chair. Hi, Rod. I just want to clarify a little bit about the process for development approval of these lots, and your confidence that this could be done under almost a delegated authority. I was just wanting to find out, is that based on have you sought legal opinion on that, or what is it sort of an interpretation at an officer level that you feel confident that can be dealt with the LDP in place?
Well, we haven't sought legal advice. We haven't had the chance to seek legal advice in the time frame here, but an LDP under the deemed provisions, the LDP can replace or amend the deemed to comply provisions of the R codes, and the deemed provisions does also include an exemption for single houses that comply with the deemed to comply provisions. So it seems quite clear to me that we could have an LDP which does address the situation at hand. As I mentioned earlier, however, if that's not the case, having an LDP, even if that was not the case, and development applications were required for individual applications, at least the LDP would provide some certainty for what the development requirements would be, which would provide some certainty for each of the applicants, and also streamline any application process if indeed that were necessary. But on our initial review, we don't believe that it is necessary. We do also have all the relevant delegations in place to deal with any applications that may be needed for these blocks.
Okay, thank you.
Rod, I think one thing that we're just conscious of is that the LDP could vary the built form provisions, but because you do have that quite unique provision in your scheme, which does have the default R10 coding for the residential zone, that you couldn't amend or vary the coding itself. And I think one of the issues that we're just keen to work through is could that lead to complexity for landowners in the future if there is uncertainty about the scheme 10 coding prevailing over the LDP?
Yes, I do understand that, and it is a little bit messy, but when read in totality, so you would have the development standards. You would have the development standards in both the R codes and the LDP to replace suitable provisions, and we think that it would still be a workable solution in the relatively short period of time that we could then rectify the situation through a scheme amendment, through an omnibus amendment, or through the scheme review process.
And just in terms of the timeline for that, you have said that with the scheme that you're looking at that landing in the department potentially later this year, but have you got any plans to do an omnibus amendment on your current scheme in the meantime, or would you be wanting to wrap those processes together?
We've in fact just finished an omnibus amendment where we normalised a number of developed areas. So we don't have any immediate plans for one at this point in time, but I would imagine that within the next year or two that there would be the need for another one.
Thanks, Rod. Any further questions, members? Thank you very much for answering our questions, and apologies that we weren't able to get you on the screen today, Rod. Thank you very much.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. For our next deputation, also regarding item 3.5, subdivision 47 lots of lot 110 Hampton Road, Pinjarra determination. We have Ashley Maple and David Majorana and Lisa Walton, I believe, in person. And then John Roth, I can see you online. I'll just re-invite you as a panelist. That'll come through in a moment. John, I can see you're one of the panelists now. Yep. John, it looks like you're unmuted. We don't have the camera on though. Oh, yeah, great. Perfect.
Yeah, camera, right. Okay, here we go.
I think we can go ahead. I know there you are. Welcome, John. Please go on with the deputation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ashley Maple from Rogro, representing the landowner Fieldview Developments. Fieldview Development purchased the site in 2024, and we commenced on the project shortly after, holding pre-lodgement meetings with both the Department of Planning and the Shire of Murray. We discussed the prospect of proceeding straight to subdivision without a structure plan. Both the Shire and the department staff confirmed support for the proposed pathway, provided that the subdivision be supported by relevant technical studies. On that basis, in early 2025, the broader project team was engaged, and that included specialist bushfire, environmental, hydrological, engineering and transport consultants. Subdivision application was submitted in October 2025. The site sits on the outer edge of the Pinjarra town site. Sorry, next slide, please. And if you can go to the next one as well. Sorry, the site sits on the outer edge of the Pinjarra town site, about 800 metres southwest of the town centre. Existing medium density residential development sits to the north, forming the Belswan Lifestyle Village, which is expected to expand further west over time. Low density residential sits to the east on Hampton Road. Next slide, please. The site is zoned urban under the Peel Region scheme and residential development under the Shire's local planning scheme, and is subject to the draft Pinjarra DSP. Next slide, please. The draft DSP recognises the site's proximity to the town centre by supporting infill residential development and higher densities within a walkable catchment. Next slide, please. The application before you seeks approval to create 47 freehold residential lots and associated roads, generally reflecting an R30 outcome with R40 size lots fronting Hampton Road. Proposed subdivision sits comfortably within its setting and responds to the desired outcomes of the draft DSP. Next slide, please. We support the recommendation for approval, except for the approach to condition 14, which limits the LDP to nominated lots only. Providing an LDP to selected lots would not provide the necessary built form controls to support development on all lots. These controls can be delivered through a single LDP that includes provisions relating to primary street, side setbacks, open space and outdoor living areas. This approach would ensure development outcomes are appropriate for the proposed lot sizes. A broader scoping LDP is within the parameters of the deemed provisions and the department's manner-informed guide, while offering the most practical mechanism to apply the intended built form outcomes across the site. Next slide, please. We respectfully request the committee and amend condition 14 to require the LDP to apply to all lots within the plan of subdivision. We've provided a requested amended condition 14 on screen, which the Shire are supportive of, as you've heard. In closing, we respectfully request the committee support the officer recommendation to approve the subdivision, subject to adopting the Shire agreed amendment 14. Thank you, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Ashley and David and John and Lisa, who I think is Lisa joining us on screen.
Lisa's online.
Lisa's online watching. Thank you very much. Look, I'm sure you'll have some questions. You probably saw from the questions to Murray, there might be some of those questions that come up that we ask you to respond to. So we'll now go to members for questions. Thank you, Commissioner Heron, and then Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose understanding the initial conversation, I mean, do you appreciate that this is somewhat unusual in terms of the Shire of Murray scheme having a default R10 provision which overlays with the coding, R10 coding that overlays with the residential development zone, and therefore the potential complexities, which some of which we were obviously talking to Rod Peake about in terms of the potential complexities that we're going to end up with the end landowner / housing proponent. What consideration was given to that in terms of determining this path over a structure plan?
As part of our engagement with the Shire and the Department of Planning, we talked to the mechanism to deal with the built form that wouldn't be there without the structure plan. We talked through the options of either an LDP that provides the development standards, not an R coding, obviously, but also the option of an R coding density plan, and then around the mechanism that is, or the head of power that's given. We landed on the local development plan, providing the development controls.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may, and then subsequent to that, given again the peculiarity that exists in this particular instance where, and again, the LDP is able to deal with elements around the built form component, but of course doesn't modify the provisions of the scheme, which require a DA for each single dwelling. Was that considered, and have you considered that as an implication of undertaking this pathway?
Yes, we have. The LDP, there is an ability to have the LDP sit in place of the development approval. The deemed provisions provide that as part of the definition of an LDP, that it can have a provision worded into the LDP that it would sit in place of development approval where it complies with, where a development is to comply with the LDP. I think the LDP being that development approval in effect can hopefully simplify the process of obtaining building permits. And
thank you. Through the chair, can I ask, was any legal advice sought in ensuring that A is able to occur and that is not subject to, I suppose, interpretation variation?
no, we haven't sought legal advice.
Thank you. Through the chair, in terms of the timing implication, which I'm assuming is the primary driver, and understanding that a structure plan in terms of urban structure is not required in this instance, but what do you see as the time differentiation of the LDP process versus undertaking a structure plan process as outlined in the scheme?
I think we would agree with the Shire's position, but I suppose in experience in dealing with structure plans, it can often take longer than 12 months, more often 18 months, but it's hard to say for a site that is a single lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Brooks. Hi. You would have heard my questions to the Shire, so no real surprises. In relation to the boundary road cross section, are you comfortable that the option showing a retaining wall, obviously, which will require fencing along the top, is an acceptable outcome and can be accommodated in terms of the value side?
I suppose if Jono perhaps might be a better place to answer this question, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Through the chair. Firstly, I'd just like to go back to the last point. I've got the floor. 15 months ago, we started this journey and we met with both the Shire as well as DPLH. And at no point was a structure plan or scheme amendment directed or considered. It was suggested that we could go through this process with the additional investigations that somewhat would be required as part of a structure plan process in order to support a subdivision application. So that was 15 months ago. So whilst I understand the technicalities of LDP ahead of a scheme amendment is not ideal, there's certainly a long period of over a year of history of this process, which we've delivered on. And through that, one thing that was put forward was that we must comply with the draft DSP, which is obviously yet to be finalised from the Shire, and that's what we've done also in delivering a site with higher density than what was previously approved. I think somewhat 10 years ago there was a sub-approval at R20 over this site. So there's also another a precedent of approvals that aren't compliant with the scheme and coding of R10. Now, getting back to this matter, there's a drainage line that I suppose for all intents and purposes you could refer to as an informal Shire drainage line. It doesn't sit within an easement, it sits within a private property. We've had significant meetings over time with the landowner to the south, and the Shire engineers have been part of that with the desire to more or less clean it up, because the Shire do get in there from time to time and clean up that drain so it functions, because it drains the larger catchment to the east of Hampton Road. Because this the battering idea has come up, the road width has also been increased, and we're confident we don't need to undertake earthworks if we go down that path within the boundary, over the boundary and into that drainage line. However, we're open to assist the Shire and also work with a neighbour in doing so and achieving something that's a better drainage situation, for the greater area. The fence that's proposed along the top of it isn't a colour bond fence. It'll be a rural standard fence, probably with balustrade and rural wiring, ring lock in between, and you know, post and rail, etc. So it'd be open form and up to 1.2, 1.4 high.
And in terms of the water management report that's been prepared so far, are you comfortable with the idea? I mean, it will be referred, if it hasn't already, it may have already by the sounds of it, but if it hasn't already, it's likely to be referred to the Department of Water and Environment Regulation, which would be normal for a structure planning process, but not necessarily always for a subdivision process. But in this case, it's likely it would go to the department. Are you comfortable with addressing their requirements in addition to the Shire's requirements for that water management report?
Yes, Commissioner, through the chair, absolutely. Our hydrologists and engineers have been working closely both you know, with the Shire, and I also believe discussions with DUA have occurred. However, the fallback position which is shown within the approval is that in the event that the final documentation cannot satisfy all parties, then 2 of those lots are potentially lost for the purpose of compensation on site. One of the benefits with the increase of width of that southern boundary road reserve is it does, I think pointed out earlier, allow for greater on-site underground storage.
And in the event that the underground storage is not supported, then you believe that there's sufficient space in those 2 lots to provide for you know, what would need to be a long-term landscaped basin.
Yes, absolutely.
To the expected standard.
Yep, absolutely. And look, all our advice to date is that we won't require those. However, because of this concern, and obviously the need to keep the process moving forward, we've allowed for that to be a condition of the subdivision and accepted it.
Thank you.
Member Moore next.
I just had 2 questions. One was to actually, and I'm wanting to understand in terms of the process, what would you think in your experience would happen if you have a DA approved today that you can't manage to have your LDP approved?
I suppose we would work through the LDP with the determining authority, whether that's the Department of Planning through the SPC perhaps, or the Shire.
I mean, in your experience, is that would seem like an unusual way of doing it, the EDA and the LDP, with all these uncertainties that we're currently discussing, which I would have thought the structure plan would have addressed in advance.
Sorry, do you mean get the subdivision and then the LDP?
Sorry, the subdivision. It feels, it just, my concern is in your experience, I understand what Mr. Roberts said, it was suggested by DPLH that this could happen in this manner, but is it your experience that this would be an unusual way of approaching it?
No, typically LDPs come as a condition of subdivision approval, but
in absence of a structure plan stuff.
Yeah, it is an unusual way of dealing with it, but I think as the reform found it's the site context always gives the opportunity to deal with the development standards in this.
So what is it about this site in this particular case that allows for that?
The lots in a single ownership, so the structure plan wouldn't be coordinating any development or infrastructure provision across multiple lots or fragmented land, and the site is capable of delivering the lots without relying on external sites. Can be fully serviced.
So is lot 500 part of this existing site?
Commissioner Adair.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Was there consideration given to going to a higher density the Shire said in their, they would have preferred to see it. I think in a structure plan, we probably would have encouraged higher density.
We are proposing the equivalent of an R30 density for the majority of the site, with the lots fronting Hampton Road to be R40 sized lots. The site does sit around 800 metres from the town centre, so it's not that close to the centre. And it is sitting abutting rural lots to the south. So we need to, I think our position is that we want to manage that interface to the land to the south without providing too high a density, but still sitting well within the setting that it is.
Thanks. Through the chair, your presentation certainly makes it clear that you are encouraged to go down this pathway. It is an option. I'm reading the report quite carefully, and it certainly seems to me that you've been encouraged along this path and journey to consider the potential of a scheme amendment, possibly a structure plan. So is it accurate to say that you were encouraged to go this way?
I would say encouraged. I would say we met.
Wording was your support. It was, you suggested that this would be supported.
The pathway was supported. The subdivision.
Yeah, it is an option as a pathway. That's clear, I think, to everyone, and being presented to us.
I respond to that for the chair. Certainly the.
Also say, I think that was a comment from John Roth as opposed to Ashley.
The idea of a scheme amendment had not come up until very late in the piece. That was very much in the very final stages of officers of the department preparing their report. It was not something that came up at all. The consultation was undertaken in 2004, I think it would have been 2005. We were sort of focused perhaps more on whether a structure plan would be required, because that would be the normal process for a residential development design. To my recollection through the process, it was never a matter that came up either from the department as a recommendation or that a scheme amendment would be required.
Yeah, no, it's not saying it's required. It's just that it was an option presented. Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, member.
Through the chair. I'm just curious that obviously this was purchased in 2024, so obviously a due diligence was done on this land holding, acknowledging that past approvals that had since lapsed had probably shown a higher density on the land, but it would have been clear that interpreting the scheme that an R10 coding applied to this land. I'm just wondering how it was moved through to and then obviously after some discussion between the Shire and DPH that other mechanisms were thought to be presented to change or facilitate a higher coding. I'm just wondering, what point was it considered that you could go to a higher coding this land and present the proposal that we see today?
Ashley, can I just start in relation to the due diligence? So through the chair, when this land was acquired, and obviously there was a previous approval that had lapsed that was based upon an R20 design. As part of the due diligence process, as I mentioned before, we met with both Shire and DPLH, and that's when an agreed process of straight to DA, providing we had those additional supporting investigations that you quite often would require for a structure plan. I reiterate what David said, that at no point a scheme amendment was a consideration or requirement. It was just a discussion between whether an LSP was required, and given there was a draft DSP going through, we were advised if we could comply with that, with the higher densities, which has been done, then straight to a DA would be sufficient with LDP supporting. David or Ashley, would you like to add?
Look, I think that covers it. The very first, at the very earliest point in looking at the land, we engaged with the Shire and the Department of Planning. That was sort of certainly foremost in our minds that we didn't want to embark on a process that wasn't given at least some support by both of those agencies. We didn't sort of stop at one point of consultation. We went through a process of concept plans, presenting those concept plans to the Shire and the department. we contemplated suitable density through that process. We sought to confirm that there weren't other technical matters that would warrant the preparation of the structure plan. So I really did land on this idea that the density code was the sort of the critical issue to be considered, either by structure plan if that was considered necessary, or through some other means. And that was where we then explored the opportunities to do a density code plan or density coding plan or an LDP. So it was certainly very involved, collaborative and lengthy process of consultation ahead of proceeding down the subdivision application route.
Thank you.
Thanks, members, for the questions, and thank you very much for the responses that you've provided today. I think in just dealing with the key matters, I think that the key questions for the committee are outlined on the second page of the report today. The first is whether discretion should be exercised to approve the subdivision, the structure plan, and the report details some of the contextual issues as well that you've outlined today to us. So I think that's a matter for members to, to come to in their decision making. The other matters go to the clear planning framework that establishes the appropriate residential density and built form outcomes. And I think we're talking about the built form outcomes sitting in the LDP. But I just wanted to see whether you wanted to comment more around that residential density piece, because I think that coding piece is where we have some questions about the certainty. And that then goes to one of the other considerations, which is about whether they'd be capable of meeting the exemptions for obtaining development single dwellings, given that the scheme describes the single house as an AA use in the residential zone, whether we are leaving a situation where potential landowners of the future may have to go through a 90-day development application process. So I think, we're weighing up the streamlining nature of this decision, but what impact that might have at the end point. And then the other issue is around the technical matters, whether they've been addressed. And I think that sort of goes to some of the questions that Commissioner Brooks has raised. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to that second and third point again around that residential, the confidence around that establishment of the residential density, given that that does sit in the scheme, and whether we are potentially setting up future landholders, owners, to have to go through individual DA processes at a 90-day advertising assessment process.
Yeah, I can start at least. Look, we have turned our mind to it through the chair. Our view is that the LDP does provide a mechanism to sort of stand in the shoes, if you like, of a development application requirement, and it deals with and can deal with sufficient development controls in that regard. We didn't take that view sort of unilaterally. It's certainly been a matter of speaking and working through that issue with the Shire. They're at the pointy end of having to deal with an application that comes to them. We've heard from Mr. Peake today in terms of his comfort and in consultation with his officers that would be potentially dealing with landowners that make inquiries. I understand the Shire is satisfied on that point. But we haven't heard from the department officers today, and I expect that will be sort of interrogated further when he considers the matter. But we've also had those discussions in terms of the appropriateness of this mechanism with the department officers. We're satisfied that it is an appropriate mechanism. It's something that we've given a lot of thought to in terms of how it might be implemented. There still matters to be worked through in terms of the specifics of the LDP, but it would be guided very much by the sort of the design and the values that we anticipate being allocated effectively in R30 and R40 split. So we're satisfied. It's not just as a matter of that being a preferred and simpler approach, but certainly through the process of consultation and the collective inputs from both the Shire and the department, we've landed on that view.
Thank you. And just another question in relation to timing, in terms of where you see the subdivision going in terms of timing, like at which point you'll be clearing conditions, titles on lots, what's the sort of time frame that you're anticipating?
I think if I speak on your behalf, John, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, the landowners are very keen to proceed. They are in the contracting game, or have a contracting business. So they're very much looking at this as a project they want to implement. They're locally based. But for any sort of delays associated with site conditions, I would expect that they would proceed very promptly to subdivision. Overall timeframe, Johnny, you might want to give me a sense of, or the committee, a sense of the sort of delivery timeframe, if you can perhaps.
Yeah, we'll hopefully be tendering in the later half of this year once the engineering design is finalised, and I'd suspect construction would commence over the summer months, where it's more ideal to be on site. So titles by middle of 27. Sales occurring, end of this year. So there's certainly a pent-up demand in the area. We did a lot of work with project builders, understanding the lot products, obtaining feedback from them regarding flute lots versus squat lots, etc. And I believe the Shire is supportive of also land supply in the area, which is non-existent, to nobody's surprise.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So if you're looking at titles by mid-27, is there any appetite to consider a scheme amendment that could run concurrently with this process, just to give that certainty to development applications at the end point?
I don't think at any point we would object to the scheme amendment being progressed in the event that there was a subdivision approval in place, and some of those timeframes in terms of detailed design, undertaking of works, proceeding to titling, was able to proceed concurrently. It is a matter that does rest with the Shire in terms of the willingness to initiate an amendment. We wouldn't have any particular objection to that process running concurrently, but we would have concerns if it was a prerequisite, in the sense that that amendment needed to be progressed or in effect before the subdivision was approved.
So you would like the Shire to initiate, as opposed to you being the applicant to initiate that scheme amendment?
I think that would probably be the most efficient way of progressing. However it comes about, whether there was a report that was needed to be prepared by ourselves, there just seems to be a couple of different matters in play in terms of where the Shire's at with its review of the scheme, etc. We would be more comfortable if the Shire sort of took the lead on that initiation process, and perhaps even in the framing of the extent and whether it's just a specific amendment to this site, or something that's dealt with or dealing with more broadly, or dealt with more broadly through an amendment process or an scheme review process.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much for the deputation today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So members, that concludes our verbal deputations for today, and we haven't received any written deputations. We are ready to go on to dealing with our items for decision, unless anyone requires a break. Happy to continue. All right, thank you very much. So our first item is 3.1, the Part 11B2 application to amend the approved service commercial development lot 805 Chapman Hill Road in Beauvale. Looking at tenancy 12C, changing from bulky goods showroom use to trade supplies. On this item, we have Paola De Perna. Sorry, Kimberly. Thank you very much for joining us, Kimberly. And just noting that Member Harmon and Commissioner Heron have stepped out on this one. Paola and Kimberly, any comments before we go to questions?
No, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this item? Okay, no questions. We'll then move to consideration of the recommendation. If I could please have a mover and seconder. Moved by Commissioner Adair, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Is there any discussion?
Speaks for well matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Any comments from any members? Right, in a straightforward matter, the land use to accommodate for a particular retailer, all very well understood, and I think we are comfortable with the report as written. It's very concise. Thank you. Members, is there any dissent to this item? Thank you, that is carried. Item 3.2, the development application for social and affordable housing at lot 29, the Parkway in Ellenbrook. On this item, by Andrew Cook and Laura O'Shea.
Just on it.
We might just wait for a short second. Right, we've waited long enough. We'll continue. Thank you very much. Heard the deputation today from Development WA. Obviously, members raised some questions around mixed use element of the proposal. Would you like to add any comments?
Thank you, Chair. We're happy to answer questions. We had the question that was made about the mixed use element to answer any questions about that.
Members? Go ahead, Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. I asked this question of Development WA as well. This is a prime location, and the scheme itself, the improvement scheme, has this land zoned as mixed use. I'm not against the use that's proposed at all. Right, but in this location, the lack of any other commercial or mixed use that could actually facilitate, I don't know, better surroundings around the train station, for example. What discussion, if any, or what consideration was given to it?
Yeah, happy to answer that to the Chair. If necessary, we can ask another officer, Brendan Tippett, who is at the back, who is involved in some of the history outside the development process, but more in terms of the preparation of the improvement scheme, but also aware of the development application. So I can just provide a few comments, and ultimately our position that is summarised in the report, that we support the development being predominantly residential in this location. We know that the site, in our view, is a transition between the existing predominant and existing commercial development, which goes towards the east, towards the town centre. You've also got the other mixed-use developments in the area, such as the next door Brook Aquatic Facility. So we do see this site as a bit of a transition from residential to the northwest, going to commercial more to the east. We note that the objectives of the improvement scheme, and it does talk about activation, and we think that the design of the development does provide for surveillance on the street. On balance, we think the predominant residential is appropriate in this location. Multiple dwellings are a de-use in the improvement scheme, as are the other whole component of non-residential uses that is proposed here, and that is, I understand, office and restaurant / cafe. I think it will be approved as. I think there's 120 square meters of what you would call non-residential floor space in this development. Laura, do you want to add anything to what
I think it was more so looking at the site in terms of being a transition, as Andrew has mentioned. That was kind of driving factor for considering, I guess, smaller offering of commercial at this particular location.
I would also say that the improvement scheme was prepared at a point in time. Brandon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but prepared at a point in time where we didn't really have a concept of what is proposed on this site. Now there is an understanding as a department or position. We support the predominant residential offering in this location and the limited, albeit limited, mixed use component in this location for those reasons.
Thank you, members. Further questions? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. And you have touched on one of the items, Joel, in terms of the understanding that there are commercial limitations and the like in terms of in terms of the overlooking and safety associated with that, that's clearly been an assessment element, and you're comfortable that the extent of passive surveillance is suitable for the location. Is that a fair assessment?
Fair assessment.
Yeah, we're quite comfortable with the ground floor and the upper floor overlooking with the balconies and surveillance that permits fencing as well.
Thank you.
Further questions, members? Okay, thank you very much. If I could then request a mover and seconder for the recommendation before us. Moved by Commissioner Heron, seconded by yes, Member Harmon. There I go again. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think that, as has been raised and as is discussed in the report, this is clearly not necessarily a standard arrangement because it is an important addition in terms of social and affordable housing. I think that it would be, well, it would ultimately be dealt with differently in a different context. I do think that it has at least addressed the issue around the passive surveillance, which I do think is critical. And whereas some sites have been developed purely as commercial, this will be set. I do think that the location is very suitable in terms of this type of accommodation, and the points of clarification that have been given around the design, that is, it won't make any distinction between what is a social or affordable. It's an integrated development. I do think it is of a design quality, and that the design review process has been thorough. I know that the submissions have raised issues in terms of antisocial behaviour and the like, which is one of the items where I go, I think that design quality is one of them, and we will ultimately deal with those issues in a meaningful way. That is, I don't believe that the nature of this accommodation is going to be the genesis of any antisocial behaviour in itself. I do also strongly support the notion in terms of the emphasis of 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings, which is very much an area of demand given the demographic change that we're seeing more broadly. Overall, I support the application with the conditions as is presented.
Very much. Member Harmon, any comment?
No, just to add, I mean, this is obviously almost the type of development you want to be seeing around these train stations, and particularly the Metronet stations. And Dev WA is clearly the best place to deliver these, given how difficult it is to make apartments stack up feasibly in areas, let alone outer areas. So it's good to see it coming to life. I think that the notion of the mixed use component, as Commissioner Heron mentioned, had this been a private development, for want of a better term, may be treated differently. But I do think that the site benefits, you've got the main street of Ellenbrook, which happens to be called Main Street, is 350 metres away from the site, which you've got a whole raft of non-residential retail, food and beverage, the shopping centres along there. So I think the amenity and that interaction of the other land uses is there, albeit just not and within this site. Happy to support it.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? Thank you, Commissioner Adair.
I'd just like to address why I was asking those questions. It's really because of the improvement scheme, and so I'm grateful for the response. And I agree. I think that this is actually a land use type that is actually needed and required. Initially, I was looking at it and thinking it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but then it's really about understanding the centre of gravity of Ellenbrook and where it really is, as opposed to what the improvement scheme was thinking it should achieve around the train station at that time. So I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Any further comments? I just might comment on the parking, because I think this is something that does come up when we see social and affordable housing. That we often see a shortfall as such. But I think the report has really outlined in detail why that is appropriate, and I really appreciated that the applicant excuse me, provided that parking study of public housing developments in Fremantle to demonstrate that that ratio, which is sitting under what is proposed here, does actually work for social and affordable housing. You couldn't get a better location in terms of proximity to the new train station and the walkability to all the sort of commercial facilities around this site. So it's ideally located to carry that that lower car parking capacity. And I also note that there has been that retention of the embayed parking, street parking as well. So just thought I'd mention that as well. We're very happy to support this development and I think the design has landed well. Are there any further comments? Any dissent? Thank you very much. That is carried. The next item is 3.3 City of Subiaco Local Planning Policy 1.1 Amendments to Residential Design in Code Volume 1. And Ben Hesketh and Reese Blue are joining us on this item. Welcome. We've heard from the City of Subiaco today. They are asking us to retain their provisions as proposed and also were made some comments about length of time taken for the opportunity to respond to the deputation today before we go to questions.
Thank you, Chair. Let's clarify the city's response to the Deputy Chair's question, separation of setback controls under the policy. So the city correctly stated that they've carried over the format of setback controls from their LPP 1.2. Just to clarify, the Commission never approved that document. It doesn't require the Commission's approval. So the department's recommendation is in no way in conflict with the previous WAPC decision. Just thought that was worth noting. In relation to the reason for the delay, it's prioritising a significant pipeline of significant projects and basically unlocking housing supply. So that's a calculated risk on the department's part to prioritise those works ahead of this. The additional reasons are that the department didn't try and work with the city to negotiate refined controls, but we were unable to do so because it was a council decision to adopt this policy rather than deal with under delegation. We also opted to present this to the SPC today to give the city the opportunity to make a deputation. That also has time implications. So except the time frame is certainly not standard, but that's sort of the background to why. The department's recommendations are effectively seeking to everyone apply what they've been for us. We don't see there to be a need to treat multiple group dwelling or single houses differently with respect to setbacks. The impact of a development on its side is really a product of the height and width type of dwelling that that's attached to. In our view, is not consequential. The other modification we've recommended is to remove the 9 metre setback to third story and above development. Our view is that that's excessive. Does start to undermine the developability of the lots that are affected and potentially the intent of the scheme. C has done design testing, which demonstrated that could build small houses, group dwellings and multiple dwellings under those controls. Our concern is that while they're workable, not particularly reasonable in our view, they may actually disincentivise a developer from carrying out a development full stop. If a developer doesn't see a reasonable prospect of being able to sell the product that they're developing, they just won't carry out the development. So we've sought to strike a balance between, yes, transitioning between fairly significant changes in density interface, while also balancing the balance of those controls and the ability to deliver fairly standard building product.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? And just before I do go to you, just oh, sorry, I did ask for questions, but I just wanted to point out that last night we did receive an email at about 7:30, I think it was, which had a map attached to it, which dealt with that question about the interaction between R20 and R50, and I just wanted to acknowledge that that had been sent out. It hasn't made it into our eScribe package, but it is there on the email. So thank you very much for providing that additional information. Go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the points of clarification. And I suppose further to the question that I had put to the city in terms of, I suppose, whether there's been any modelling or testing in terms of the implications. So the city has obviously undertaken some testing, although there wasn't any modelling in terms of implication. Has the DPLH undertaken any modelling in terms of what the impact would be one or the other? I mean, obviously, there's an assessment around developability, but I just want to clarify that point first of all.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a assessment on the broader impact of lot yield. The conclusion of the model was that lot yield would be fairly, the impact of lot yield would be fairly minimal. It is dependent upon smaller dwellings being constructed. So more 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom product, which is identified as being required in the city of Subiaco.
Yeah, just for context on the modelling, it is under pages 31 to 35 of attachment 5, as well as 41 to 5. So some hatchet areas give good information visually of the extent of dwelling yield or dwelling developable area that would be lost.
Thank you very much. And then further to that, again, my query in relation to where those other provisions had come from was obviously a direct transfer. You've already clarified the point that that was not either assessed or determined by either the department or the commission or the SPC, that was purely something that had been developed under the previous framework. Is that
so the local governments don't require commission approval to modify setback requirements on volume 2. So that's been adopted by the city without the commission's involvement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, members? Right, thank you very much. If we can deal with the item with the mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Commissioner Heron, and seconded by Commissioner Adair. Do you wish to make comment?
Certainly. I did give consideration and wanting to understand some of the drivers. I echo some of the sentiment, which was the basis of my question before, around why a multiple dwelling, group dwelling or single dwelling in terms of windows, wall heights, etc., that they are the determinants in terms of appropriate setbacks. It's really on that basis that although I support the intent that the city is undertaking in relation to protecting local amenity, I'm comfortable with the officer recommendation in terms of the modifications as is presented, and therefore support the recommendation as presented before us.
Okay. Commissioner Adair, any comment?
Thanks, Chair. I think this is a good effort by the City of Subiaco to try and rectify some real problems that came about out of this scheme and the interface. So I think, you know, the work that's been done and where you've got to, this is actually a pretty good document. I understand where the city's coming from in some perspectives, but I'm happy to support the recommendation as it's put to it.
Okay. Members, any further comments? Any dissent? That is carried. On to item 3.4. Very much, Ben and Reese. Item 3.4, section 31, reconsideration of subdivision conditions at Parapango Avenue. Commissioner Adair stepping out on this one. Brian Shaw and June Lau are joining us. Welcome to the meeting, Brian and June. Wish to provide any comment before we go to questions?
Chair, if I may just make a few comments. Today we've heard a reference to an agreed outcome of the SAT process. To clarify, no criticism is meant, that the SAT review remains on foot and has always progressed on the assumption that go to the Commission for determination. Therefore, any reference to agreement should only be interpreted in the context of officers' support for a Section 31 invitation to give effect to this decision-making pathway.
Understood.
It is also something to note that the officer's recommendation does not seek to fetter or preempt any future decision on the status of Marmion Avenue under the MRS. Instead, it reflects the merits of the application addressing the conditions under review outlined in detail.
That was all.
Well, possibly another point just to add is that This application should be viewed in context. There are several other subdivision applications concerning the wider estate. So therefore, if the Commission is supportive of this approach, it is likely to guide future decision making at that step.
Very much, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan and June? Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you very much. In terms of the item that had been raised, in terms of there's not a developer contribution arrangement established, that there was in fact some deeds which now may be out of context. Are you aware, and obviously the city not supporting this proposal based on funding, has there been any discussion with the city? Are they intending on modifying any or establishing any arrangements to address future cost sharing arrangements?
And through the chair, the notion of a DCP was raised, but I don't think there is any appetite from the city's perspective to progress that. As understood, Main Roads do run several funding programs, including the Metropolitan Regional Road Group, which manages and administers state funding. So like all local governments, at that point in time, it would be open to the city to progress future funding requests through such channels. In terms of the previous development agreement, yes, that obviously reflects a moment in time, based more in respect to the former landowner TOCU group. Those requirements, those development infrastructure requirements have been fulfilled. Marmion Avenue did fall out, this portion did fall out of that. So certainly we have regard to the city's views and note that the review itself is confined to the conditions under review. And in that setting, we must look at the underlying limbs of what makes a condition valid, which specifically the reasonableness and the relevance, or in this case, the nexus. So we feel that proportional contribution, as per the bulk earthworks, the seeding, which will transpire in future stages, as well as the construction of a portion for bushfire is reasonable in that setting.
Sorry, through the chair. One further question is just in relation to the issue of traffic lights. My understanding and recollection is that that can only be approved by Main Road, so that is also, as a condition in terms of trying to require traffic lights until such time as Main Roads WA actually deem it to be appropriate, that they can't actually be installed. Is that?
Yeah, certainly. And look, considering this in context again, we see these conditions as interrelated, and the starting point would be to look and examine at the need and nexus of Marmion Ave, the construction of that. Should the Commission be of the view that that's not required for those factors, in our view, the requirement for that intersection treatment falls away, specifically the upgrading of that to the ultimate.
Thank you.
Okay, members, further questions? No further questions. Thank you very much. If we can then move to consider the item. Is there a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Thank you. It's moved by Member Franklin, seconded by Member Harmon. Please go ahead if you wish to make any comments.
So I believe that through the review SAT process has examined thoroughly the implications and the unique situation this development now presents itself, and I think this is probably the most prudent course forward. Doesn't perhaps address the more strategic implication, but that is beyond the bounds of this particular subdivision, but he has alerted us to something that may need to be considered in the future. But the purposes of this proposal, it seems an appropriate approach to take.
Yeah, I agree with Member Franklin and the officer's report. I mean, the delivery of the ultimate form of Marmion Ave, the extension of Marmion Ave is clearly disproportionate to the subdivision that's being proposed. And I think the applicant related to contributing to circa 3% of current traffic volumes, and the report mentions 17% of future. So clearly out of proportion, but I think the resolution here is the right one. It secures the benefit, it has the benefit of securing the corridor and some early works without putting an unreasonable burden on the applicant and sterilising the land. So happy to support it on that basis.
Very much, Member Harmon. Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Heron.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this, and I think others have spoken to some of the rationale. I would flag really for the City of Wanneroo's benefit, the need to perhaps look more broadly. But given the lack of certainty around what's going to be happening to the north and the timing or relevance thereof, I think that this is an appropriate balance.
Thank you. Any further comments? Is there any dissent? Very much that is carried. Yeah, so I said what's on my god, 10:30 last night, and 9:30 that hasn't been.
Yes.
So I'll have to pause. Members, we just have one more item to deal with, but it has come to my attention that there was an email that was circulated last night that hasn't gone out to all members. So I'd just like to pause the meeting for briefly, just to enable you all to have access to that email. It will be asked to go to confidential session. So if I could please have a mover and seconder. Thank you. Moved by Member Moore, seconded by Commissioner Brooke, to go into confidential session to consider further information. I do apologise. We will invite you back into the meeting shortly, but I just do need to circulate this email. Wouldn't mind. Thank you. and we've just had a short confidential break to consider some late advice that came to the committee. So thank you again for your patience. We are now dealing with item 3.5. Okay. The subdivision of lot 110 Hampton Road in Pinjarra, and we're joined by Justin Breeze, Jai Fagan and Aaron Sutherland. Thank you very much. We have had quite a lengthy deputation, questions to both the Shire and the applicant on this item, just giving you the opportunity to address points that have been raised today before we go to questions.
Through the chair, I'm happy for the team to have questions on the matters that have been raised and to provide clarity as is required.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, over to you. Member Franklin. Sorry, Member Harmon.
There was a comment made, I think, by John earlier around the department not raising the concept of a scheme amendment or an LSP at any point in the process. Do you want to just touch on that?
Yeah, through the chair. The department is regularly asked to have pre-lodgement meetings and to, I suppose, talk about the multiple streams that an application can and can't be dealt with. I suppose that in the situation of this one being a single ownership, noting that the regs do allow for subdivision to occur without a structure plan. Obviously, with the disclaimer that it's officer discussion, not a decision of the commission. That would have been one of the matters that was discussed, and as also was clarified. However, the subdivision would need to deal with all matters from a strategic context and policy framework that LSP would deal with the site, so that it could actually be used.
Commissioner Herron.
Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to the if you could talk to the uniqueness of the Shire of Murray's provisions in relation to this zone, because the notion of a R10 density and also a single dwelling being a discretionary use, that is not a standard provision in a development zone, is my understanding. Can you just confirm that?
Yeah, through the chair. I will hand over to the team to talk about the technicalities of that, but that is correct. Development zones more broadly across the metro area do not have a default R code, nor do they have a default use classification that single houses are an AA use. But I'll hand over to Joel.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, obviously through the chair. Yeah, the Shire of Murray scheme is well aware. It was prepared in 1989, so it's obviously close to 7 years of age now, and obviously has been updated and amended through that process. Obviously, there is some bespoke elements to the local planning scheme that obviously needs to be considered through the application. But yeah, as Justin alluded to, it's not obviously typical to have use classes for a residential development zone or a development zone or scheme provisions providing for a density code in the absence of one.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. In terms of the issues surrounding some of those peculiarities, first of all, has there been a draft, or do we understand how the provisions of not DSP again, LDP? Like, you know, would there be value in consideration of an LDP as part of this process to provide that clarity in relation to how that would operate? And was it requested, I suppose, is also part of the question.
Through the chair, I'll start. In the absence of a local structure plan or an appropriate scheme amendment to zone the site, no, we have not seen a completed and draft LDP. There has been discussions with the department, the Shire and the proponent over what would typically be in an LDP. And thus the current recommendation as the condition sits is for lots that are from a locational point of view for an LDP to be required. As it stands at present, the LDP doesn't cover all lots. But yeah, we have not seen the full content of what deemed provisions would be sought to be varied in a final product.
Thank you.
Member Harmon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on that, Justin and team, are you comfortable? So the strategy here, I assume, is to mitigate, and what the applicant and Shire is trying to mitigate is the need for individual DAs for every single lot. Hence the wording of the LDP being proposed by the applicant and the Shire. Regardless of I guess the wording, are you comfortable that an LDP is the mechanism that can do that? Given the use peculiarities that we have with this site, like can that be captured within LDP, whether it's part of this approval or outside of it, but just in general that an LDP can do it? Not necessarily whether it should, but whether it can.
Through the chair, I think in the deliberations and us looking at it, I don't know. It comes down to what is in LDP, I suppose. Does it address all the matters required for it to address from an exemption point of view? I suppose it would appear legally possible. It depends on how it's created and to what extent the Commission is willing to approve those elements that the local government can't support.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, members, questions, Commissioner Brooks?
So my understanding is that the Department of Water and Environment Regulation have seen the draft water management report. Is that the case?
I'll to defer to team. Has it actually been formally referred?
It's my understanding that that has not occurred.
Would and sort of following on from that, would you be comfortable with I guess elevating the involvement of DEWA in clearing of condition 7 to require that to occur, their endorsement to occur, as opposed to just consulting with them? I'm just concerned that if there was under normal circumstances, if it was a local structure plan, a local water management report would require DEWA endorsement, whereas subdivision typically wouldn't. But I think in this case, we would gain a lot more comfort by having DEWA actually endorsing the water management report, as opposed to just shown it. So that was one question around if you were comfortable with that as an amendment to that condition.
So through the chair, look, as it relates to condition 7 and the current wording of that condition, whether an advice note was added to that, clarifying the broader role of DEWA, or the condition itself modified to have a greater involvement, I'd see no issue with that from my point of view.
And I'd put there's a few extra specific things that I think could be pointed out in an advice note as well, which would be around water quality treatment, landscaping of the temporary basin, and the interface in particular with that open drain to the south. So I'd be comfortable with those kind of insertions into an advice note as well.
Through the chair, that's fine. And I suppose because we are dealing with a matter that doesn't have an LSP and we're dealing it through conditions, it's through that clearance process and those additional technical works which leads to the final positive plan process is the types of things that we do need to work with the Shire to do. So if there's further clarity and certainty around how that should be worded up, I haven't got a problem.
Okay. Go ahead, Member Franklin.
Yes, through the chair, I just wanted to clarify the exact approval, the process of initiation and preparation of an LDP, and who is involved in that process, and what how the Shire is engaged, and ultimately would it require the Commission's consideration as well, just to clarify at what point?
Chair, that's a really good question. I will hand over to Aaron to answer that in more detail, but my understanding is that the do you want to talk? You've actually got notes on it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So under the regulations, local government is responsible for initiation of LDP. There is instances when the commission can require one, such as through a condition of subdivision approval. But generally more the front end processes with the government. Once it's initiated, there's a certain process needs to occur. And that's the stage where, say, if it's initiated, the government would come and seek the commission's approval for any variations to the R codes that are being proposed by that LDP. So that the commission isn't the decision maker for the LDP, but they approve any variations within an LDP. The determination then falls back to the government.
Members, any further questions? I hope you don't mind, Rowan, if I ask you a question, just that we heard from the Shire of Murray today about the status of their potential scheme coming through after their strategy has been dealt with. Do you have any line of sight over that at this point in time, or is that still sitting Shire at the moment?
No, we do have some line of sight over that through their draft local planning strategy, through I guess preliminary discussions that we've had with the Shire. So I'm very comfortable with the timeframes that they mentioned today.
So they're talking about submitting the scheme through in the next sort of by the, I think they said, was it by the end of this year?
I think that was what they had said, yes.
Okay. And then the time for the DPLH to assess and consider the scheme?
Well, the first step will be consideration for consent to advertise. It's a regulated timeframe in which we need to do that, provided to the minister. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I think it might be 60 days.
Can I just clarify, have they actually done a report of review? So has that been sort of established that they need to prepare a new scheme and the approach taken for that to occur?
Yeah, that's correct. They have done a report of review. That was commission endorsed. Proceeded to strategy and a new scheme.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, well then if I can have someone move and second the report before us, that then enables us to debate. Thank you very much. Moved by Commissioner Herron, seconded by Member Harman. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have moved this on the basis of enabling discussion and debate. I will flag that I appreciate the underlying intent that has been applied both by officers, the Shire and the proponent, in terms of expediting an outcome, and particularly in the context of housing needs, etc., looking at different approaches and innovation, and that is critical. But there is that distinction between streamlining versus potential risks that could be applied. In this particular instance, I do think that perhaps the particular considerations here about the peculiarities associated with the base zone for a start. So there's no question about the ability to go straight to a subdivision application in some instances. And there's no issues of land fragmentation, etc., which would apply. So there would be circumstances which I could envisage that this would be an appropriate pathway. My concern remains around the potential that the risk and potential time implications will just be pushed down the road. That is, without a clear outline of the contents of the LDP, and I wrote down LDP so I don't forget it. But without understanding the content and provisions within that LDP, there is an enormous leap of faith that's having to be done. And even with the best intent, that even with that being in place, that could actually present some risk. The other key issue, the issues around the water management remain a concern from my perspective as well. given that, yes, the enablement of moving straight to a subdivision is where all technical issues are also clearly understood. And although there is a provision for this temporary basin, again, there is a lack of certainty as to the outcome. I fully accept that a scheme amendment process, although lengthy in one way, would address this. I also would understand that undertaking the LSP is ultimately the underlying intent that should have been actually undertaken. And there is a basis in which you're sort of saying, for the sake of a potential period of time saving, is that risk worthy? And ultimately that is for the people around this table to determine. But I will flag that my position would be that we need to be looking at ways in which we can potentially expedite an outcome, but remove some of that risk. And depending on the feedback of others, I would foreshadow a potential deferral of the item.
Thank you. Member Harmon, wish to make comment?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Commissioner Herron. I think it's a little bit cart before the horse in this situation, and notwithstanding the fact that it can be approved and it can be done, the absence of a structure plan and the uniqueness of the scheme, which is also outdated, just adds a degree of uncertainty here. And I think the officer's report spells out that we need to turn our mind to whether it is in accordance with orderly and proper planning, and whether the approval of the subdivision would not prejudice the future development. And my gut feel is that it probably wouldn't prejudice future development, and it probably is in line with orderly and proper planning. But the reality is we just don't have enough information to make that decision. I don't have enough information to make that decision with any degree of certainty. And I think the LDP that is sort of foreshadowed by condition 14 would go a long way in providing that certainty. But we'd almost want that first before the subdivision approved. So I'd be supportive of a deferral to enable that to happen.
Commissioner Adair?
The voice, I've got to speak against the recommendation, and I'm at this stage not convinced about a deferral. I feel that the conditions as presented are doing a lot of heavy lifting here. They're trying to get all the information that really should have been produced prior to it even being lodged, probably. So that's not the role of subdivision. I mean, subdivision is the last stage of land development. It shouldn't be actually trying to gather all the information up the room behind it, sort of thing, to make sure that it can actually work. There's been a lot of discussion about normal processes and this different terminologies. I know that the applicant was talking about moving forward, keeping this moving forward, and I think everyone is trying very hard to accommodate that. But at the end of the day, in my mind, there's a lot of frustration, and there's been a disproportionate amount of time spent on subdivision of a single lot and single ownership because the information is not being provided. The work has not been done. So to me, that very quickly goes to that is not proper and orderly planning, as I understand it. So that doesn't satisfy the first hurdle for me. And in that case, I don't believe I should have support the application.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? Member Franklin?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, I'm not in a position at this moment to be supporting the recommendation as put forward. I, like the Commissioner there, are in two minds about whether this should actually be supported even in a deferral consideration. I believe that in many ways it is a risky undertaking at this point of time to be making a determination. As conveyed by Commissioner Dare, we haven't really had the full appreciation or the amount of information to make informed decision. I believe there may be some legal implications with this as it's presented before us. I think resorting to an LDP rather than a local structure plan is perhaps whilst a pragmatic approach, maybe not a desirable approach to take. I feel that in many ways, whilst many of the matters for structure planning may not be appropriate in this context, the issues of district drainage and interface to the adjoining land to the south may well tip it into being considered for and justify an LSP. So on that basis, I'm not prepared to support it at this current time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Adair and Member Franklin. I don't feel comfortable at this time in exercising discretion that's needed. And I really don't believe it is orderly and proper planning. And we've discussed and we've gone round and round this morning, and I don't feel comforted by where we've landed. So
Commissioner Lakey, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. Yes, I think I won't repeat a lot of the discussion and points people have raised, but I think I tend to agree with all the comments, particularly that this bit of the horse before the cart. So I won't be supporting it as currently drafted, but I am leaning towards the deferral option to give more time for this to be considered, LDP to be worked through. Thank you.
More?
I just wanted to say that while I actually do agree with a lot of what Commissioner Herron said, I am disinclined to support and I think it's going to lead to too much uncertainty. And I think asking, I would actually go as far as saying that Adair and Franklin are correct in that it's just too much to be asked and too much reliance on what could have been dealt with through the local structure plan. And I'm really concerned that nobody's actually facilitating a timely building houses on, which is really what we're all trying to do. I think this convoluted approach has done no service for anyone, really. So I would be supporting an outright refusal and definitely not a deferral.
Okay, Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, look, I'm also inclined to refuse. I guess where I get to is that I'm currently not satisfied with the amount of information that's been provided. And as a consequence of that, in order to approve, we would be relying very heavily on conditions to get more of that information in place. And as it stands, I have very little certainty that the current subdivision layout as shown is actually deliverable. I believe that the two lots that are currently shown as possibly a drainage reserve at some point, probably are certainly required as a drainage reserve. And we've not got any information to indicate what the landscaping outcome might be associated with those. We also don't have any indication of the landscaping outcome at the interface with the adjacent property and the drain. And there's, in all likelihood, a requirement for significant fencing there to provide safety to the community, which and the community outcome would be a significant question for me. So there's so many questions associated with it that I just feel like it really requires a refusal at this point.
Thank you. Look, that's a majority of the committee indicating that they are supporting a refusal. I don't know if anyone sees any utility in moving a deferral motion to at least see if there's any opportunity. But I'll just generally speak. I understand the issues that have been raised, and I think that there's the key questions again are whether we do have discretion to consider dealing with a proposed subdivision in the absence of a structure plan, and that comes down to whether you're satisfied that the matters that would be dealt with in a structure plan have been dealt with sufficiently. And obviously, we're hearing that committee members do not believe that that is the case. And then there's the secondary issues around the clear planning framework and whether an LDP does provide that, and what that means in terms of future planning development applications and exemptions. And I think for me, that's where there is a lack of clarity. An LDP as a condition of a subdivision would ordinarily come where you have a a structure plan in place. So dealing with a subdivision in the absence of both a structure plan and not having an LDP presented at the same time, I think is an issue that I'm unable to overcome in this meeting. The question of whether a structure plan is needed is something that I'm more open to, and I think that Commissioner Brooks has raised two key questions that do need to be furthered, and whether that can be done through subdivision is a question, and that's around the drainage and the interface with the rural land. I think they are key questions. But look, I would be open to a deferral because I think that gives the applicant the opportunity to look at what planning instrument they wish to explore, whether they wish to take the time to do a structure plan and have further engagement with the Shire and the department about how quickly that can be done and what are the key issues that we're looking at dealing with through a structure plan, whether they would be willing to contemplate a scheme amendment to the issue of the coding and the exemptions for development approval, or whether they do think that there is merit in further exploring an LDP, and whether they can satisfy the questions that have been outlaid at the outset of this report, and whether that LDP can actually satisfy that, and whether they need time to get some legal advice around that as well, to really deal with these issues that we've raised. So I see a deferral as an opportunity to give the applicant more time to consider how they wish to proceed, given that we have aired these issues in some detail today, and that's something that I would like to afford them, but I can see that that's not comfortable for many of the members around the table. Are there any further comments? Well, anyone who hasn't already spoken? As a mover, you do have the right of reply if you wish to.
Sure. Well, and again,
If a deferral it would come before you close debate.
yes. Well, I was just going to ask the question though, in terms of the foreshadowed deferral. So, is that able to stand in order to determine whether there is support for the refusal, or do we have to deal with the deferral first and then?
Need to defer first, and then if the deferral fails, then we would be dealing with a refusal. So I think it's just a question of whether any of the members who've already spoken and been quite definitive would be swayed a deferral motion.
Well, I would support a deferral motion on the basis that, as I say, there are some peculiarities here. I think that the deferral does provide the context in which the application can be reconsidered. I don't think there's an issue in terms of the fundamental proposition in relation to the proposal. There are elements of detail which are lacking, and there are areas of questions around process to provide the certainty. I hold the view that by deferring for a period of, let's call it 60 days, would enable the proponents to come back with a council-supported framework in terms of LDP, as well as some supporting information in relation to support the fact that there would be able to be the delegations available that would not compromise, or alternatively come back with an outline of an LDP and the process which would be able to address it. So
So that's the reason. Is there a seconder for the deferral motion? It's seconded by Member Harmon, on deferral motions, technically it's a procedural motion and we don't debate deferral motions, but just in terms of outlining those grounds which you have done, they would be the basis on which the item would be deferred. So it has been moved and seconded, so I will put that to the vote now to see if there is any appetite for a deferral. So all those in favour? All those against? The deferral is lost, so we're back to the substantive motion. Is there any further discussion on the item? Is there any dissent?
Motion to
Yes.
the.
Yes. To approve it, yes. Okay, so just recording that that's 5 members who are dissenting to the item, so that has been lost.
Up as well.
Oh, sorry, Paul, did you dissent as well?
Sorry, I just wanted to check, that was the deferral or
No,
the system?
that's the recommendation before us to approve the subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've just voted on that, and we have 5 members dissenting, and I'm just checking whether you are as well.
Okay, I'm dissenting, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's lost. We do need an alternate motion. If we could have some text presented to us. Is it possible to screen share?
Just being set up now.
Might need to make it larger.
Happy to move that. It's moved by Commissioner Adair and seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Any discussion?
I think I've outlined my reasons, and I think the reasons that I put there, I articulate it clearly. I think the 5th point is actually pretty important, because as much as the regulations allow for us to consider this, and I acknowledge that, and it is an appropriate pathway at certain times, it shouldn't be seen as an automatic bypass to get through doing the work that's required. So
thank you.
It's important.
Commissioner Brooks, any comment?
Yes, similarly, it's really just about making sure that the appropriate level of investigation and work is carried out to support a subdivision in front of us. We should be comfortable that it can be delivered the way it's presented, and at the moment, this subdivision layout, I felt I couldn't support.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? Look, just to be clear, I will vote against this, not because I support the officer recommendation, which has been voted down, but because I support a deferral motion to allow the applicant further time to provide additional information. Just for clarity. So unless there's any further discussion, all those in favour of the alternate motion? All those against? Paul, I didn't see you vote. You're voting against? Okay, thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much. That concludes business for today. We do have opportunity to discuss urgent or other behind closed doors, but given the meeting, as whether there's any need to do that today. No? Okay, so with there being no urgent or other business, I would like to thank all members for their attendance today and the officers. Thank you for the very comprehensive discussions today, and I'll close the meeting at 12:39 p.m. Oh, Rebecca, yes.
Oh.
Member Moore, thank you. It is your last meeting today. So again, thank you so much for your service to the SPC. I think I've said it to you in person, but to say publicly, we have been very much appreciative of your commitment to the committee, even when overseas, and the expertise that you have brought both as a former SAT member and as a former government architect has been invaluable. And we know that you continue on at the Heritage Council or to a continued involvement with that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Now I'll officially close the meeting at 12:40 because that should be on the public record.